Good afternoon and welcome back to the Galway Film Fleadh and to this afternoon's screening of the Dakota Entrapment tapes. Another brilliant documentary from Fine Point Films and director Trevor Birney, who's with me now I'm assuming from Belfast. Is that where you are, Trevor?
Well, good afternoon.
How's things?
Grand. Very disappointing not to be in Galway. And that's just not on behalf of myself and Brendan, but all the families who have such, it's in the calendar every year. And unfortunately, this is the first year we've missed for, I can't remember how long. So congratulations, all the team. It seems as if it's going fabulous.
Thanks a million. We appreciate that. Wish you could be here as well, obviously. But we'll make up for it next year.
We will. We certainly will.
Listen, there was no slowing you down, though. You've got another fantastic new film out. And I just think, I'm constantly amazed how I think Brendan joked one of the previous Fleadhs how you guys call yourselves like the maestros of misery or something like that. I don't like how you find these stories and how you turn them into such engrossing docs. I continue to be really impressed. Well done on a great film. And what's amazing about this one as well is how prescient it kind of was, or how relevant it has become, given everything that's happened in the past year. Since the murder of George Floyd, everyone's been like police corruption in the United States has been under a microscope. And we see at the end of your film just there, Officer Weber still hasn't paid for his crimes for what he's done.
Exactly, and I think that is the question about the lack of accountability. I mean, we started this film actually just after No Stone Unturned, whenever we had looked at the issue of accountability within police force and allegations of collusion here in the North, when after 6 men had been murdered at Loughin Island in 1994. And after that film, I began to look at how police forces in the US dealt with the issues of basically informants and how they handled informants and the impact that had on the judicial issues in the US. And through that process, we happened to come across the story of Andrew Sadek. And then it was, the work on the film was interrupted at the time that myself and my colleague Barry McCaffrey were arrested by police here way back in August 2018. In fact, the judgment in that case is just going to come tomorrow, we've just been told. So we were dealing with the impact of No Stone Unturned while I was working on the Dakota Entrapment tapes, and we were just shocked and stunned by what had happened to Andrew. Here he was at the time of his life. Colleges are meant to be places where students are protected, they're allowed to experience life differently, living away from home for the first time. But what occurred here was that the local police force basically preyed on the students, and a result of this incredibly corrupt system, where in order to draw down federal funds, they had to create a drug problem in the local town. And how did they do that? But to go up to the campus and pick on absolutely innocent students like Andrew Sadek. So it was just working on the film was very important to us, and it is a story that we feel is very relevant to the type of work that we're doing. And I hope it tells us a little bit about that lack of accountability there is within police forces that allows this corruption to continue, that allows people to be shot dead, and absolutely no accountability for that. And the images of what we've seen coming out of America over the last 6 months, or last 6 weeks, are highly relevant when you see what happened here to Andrew Sadek.
Absolutely. I think it's even sort of it's kind of distillation of Trump's America, really, when you look at how, what was allowed to happen here. It was based on false information. It was based on, these enforcement agencies that were allowed to operate with no oversight, with coercion as well. You must have seen a lot of that during the course of piecing this investigative story together.
Absolutely. I think the thing was just that they were acting with complete impunity, that the police, at no point was there any oversight. At no point did anyone say, hold on, is this the way that we really want to treat, the kids that are going to be the future of this part of America? And, North Dakota has many similarities with the north of Ireland, in that it's a very rural part of the world. It's a very sparsely populated part of the world. it's a very law-abiding part of the world, and that really there is very little crime. But yet this war on drugs that began way back with Richard Nixon has created such an industry where basically they're in a vicious cycle where, in order to draw down federal funds, you have to declare that you're involved in the war on drugs. And as one of our contributor talks about, you now can get elected in North Dakota, like many other states, still today, by basically saying that you want to criminalize those who are using marijuana. And I just, there was so much learning for us. There was so much to look at and so much to get in under the bonnet on this story, and so much to be shocked by, that in this very, very sleepy Midwestern state, that this sort of level of corruption could be happening under this very flat facade.
Yeah. And can I ask you as well, just sticking to things that, how the events of the current year have kind of informed how I've been watching this? Because I imagine, and I wonder if sort of your research in the making of the documentary backs this up, but I imagine that for every Andrew Sadek, there's probably, like 100 Black Americans who've been persecuted using these same tactics. Did you see a lot of the intersection of this kind of corruption and race in America?
Well, we did. In fact, we're dealing with another case that happened in Baltimore, and really another case of stunning corruption involving a young African American man who was again coerced, threatened, intimidated into becoming an informer, or a confidential informant, as the American system calls it. And that is another one of the stories that we're looking at, that we may develop for a future film that picks out those themes, and really how it really undermines the confidence in policing in inner city areas such as Baltimore, where there have been huge problems. If you look at the coronavirus impact in Baltimore, the length of the queues to the food banks, the inequality that there is in a place like Baltimore is just truly shocking. But also then how that there can be this vacuum created between the African American community and the laws, the forces of law and order, and how police forces use that vacuum in order to really put young men and women into incredibly dangerous positions, which really is not adding anything. The case of Andrew Sadek really didn't take out a major drug dealer. It did not rid that part of the world of drugs that were killing people in the way that we've seen through the epidemic of drug epidemic that there has been in America in the last 10 years. This was a very low level crime. And that's what we found in inner city Baltimore as well, that this was marijuana, but it really was police terrorizing young, naive men in their communities, whether they be out in Dakota or in, African American communities like Baltimore.
Yeah, it's shocking stuff. I want to sort of switch tactics for a second and move away from the sort of the crime of it all and look at the personal story that you've got at the center of this as well, because it strikes me that probably a lot of the light wouldn't have been shed on this if it wasn't for Tammy Sadek, and what an amazing woman she was. I mean, it seemed from watching the film that the media was almost taking the police line on it in the beginning until Tammy started asking questions.
Absolutely. I mean, North Dakota has, like many areas of America, and I think this is part of the problem and part of what we've seen in the last 6 weeks, is you have a very compliant media in America. A lot of the channels in America work with police hand in glove. You look at crime series that are broadcast nightly on American television, CSI. In all those stories, the police are the heroes. In all those stories, the police are the good guys. So America has been fed a diet of law and order, police cars, black and white, Starsky and Hutch, all the famous detectives. These guys are all heroes. Whereas what we've seen in the last few weeks, as a result of basically citizens videoing police on what they're really like, you're really starting to see that there's a completely different side of that story. And Tammy Sadek knew that from the first ever meeting she had with Jason Weber, that there was something very wrong. This wasn't the son that she raised. This wasn't Andrew. There was something wrong here. there was something very corrupt. And it was only her tenacity and determination, supported by her husband, John, and Andrew's friends, that really got at the truth, because the media generally just followed the police line. This was a missing student. Oh my God, he was caught up in drugs. Oh, that all makes sense. So he's on the run. He's got felonies hanging over him. So the media really took the police line until Tammy started to make her voice heard in a very determined way. And thank God, and fair play to the journalists there in Fargo and in North Dakota, they started to listen to Tammy and they began to ask questions. But, as you hear Nicole saying in the film, she stood up in a newsroom and said, has anybody heard of Semka? What is this? And everybody was sitting there going, no, we never heard it. But so there hadn't been those checks and balances that we have in a proper society where police are held to account publicly. And I think that is a story. And I think that is a very important element of what we've seen in America in the last few weeks. And it's going to be very interesting. We've seen cancellation of shows like Cops and others. We've heard about channels that are now, are wanting to start to ask questions about police forces. And I think that is going to be something, well, certainly that's something we're in the north of Ireland very used to, asking questions of police forces and holding them to account. So, I hope we're going to see more of that in America. And I think that has got to be that the media is less compliant and more ready and open-minded about what exactly went on here. Because you got to ask yourself, if there hadn't been the evidence, the video evidence of George Floyd, would we know as much about George Floyd as we do now? Would there have been the worldwide reaction to George Floyd's death if there wasn't video? Or would he just been another African-American man who died with a family alleging that police killed him? If you look at Breonna Taylor's case, which is another horrifically violent case, there was no video, yet Breonna's case is not as well known as George Floyd's is. So, I think that journalists have to step up to the plate. Journalism really has to step up to the plate. Filmmakers have to step up to the plate and really understand what it is to hold police forces to account and the importance to do that of society, not to take press releases and simply repeat them and take their word for granted.
Absolutely, well said. And I mean, fair play. You have put your money where your mouth is on that one, as you kind of were mentioning at the beginning. So you said you've got a judgment coming down about the PSNI case, the fallout from No Stone Unturned.
Yeah, so we've just heard this afternoon, myself and Barry McCaffrey, after we were arrested and these offices were raided and, all the information taken off our servers, all the computers lifted, all the stacks lifted, documents lifted here. We've got the physical materials back, but we still don't, the police are still holding on to all the No Stone Unturned rushes, all the rushes from the Dakota Entrapment tapes that we had filmed at that stage. Everything was on our server and the police are refusing to hand that back. We took a judicial review and the warrants that were issued to allow the raids were quashed a year ago, but we're getting the full judgment tomorrow afternoon at 2:00. And the court has already said it's going to lay down new structures to prevent police being able to get judgment, to be able to get warrants to arrest journalists and to raid their offices and homes on false allegations, which that's what they did in our case. And we're looking forward to that judgment. And we hope it's going to be a very important judgment for journalists right across Ireland and the UK.
Well, we look forward to it as well. Solidarity from the Galway Film Fleadh there, and another brilliant film for anyone who hasn't seen it, No Stone Unturned. Just to ask a very direct and perhaps obvious question, but how exactly do you think Andrew Sadek died?
I believe Andrew Sadek, I really do believe that Andrew Sadek took his own life. I do believe that he was forced into a position that he simply felt that he couldn't get out of. I absolutely agree with Joel Heidkamp in the film, who says that, it isn't as important to what exactly happened that night or how, as to we look as the importance of the events that led up to it. We did examine and study and investigate Andrew's movements on that night. We looked at all the speculation, all the rumors that had been up on social media. We did look at, did he go to a party? Was there a girlfriend around that had led him into, a very dangerous area of the city? We looked at that, and at the end of it, we felt that really the film represents our best guess of what happened. We discounted a lot of the allegations. We respect Tammy's position. We totally understand it, and we absolutely support her that there should be a full FBI inquiry, and reopened now into Andrew's case to absolutely ascertain the facts. But I think everything we know right now leads us to believe that Andrew felt that he had no choice but to take his own life. However, the fact that the gun has never been found, does lead weight to some other hand being involved, does lend weight to, questions being asked. But we certainly could find no evidence that there was anyone else involved. But that's not, we left the film. We felt that the film represents, all aspects to the case. We felt the film does give a sense of both sides, that it could be murder. But, I think at the end of the day, we come down on the side that it most likely is suicide.
Just some great comments coming in on social media, just about congratulating yourself on a brilliant journalistic investigative film. I think judging by the online reaction, people really enjoyed it. I just want to, before I wrap up, quickly ask you about, do you sort of agree with the current sentiment at the moment that we're kind of living in a golden age for these kind of true crime documentaries?
I think that it's a golden age of articles that tell us about the golden age of true crime documentaries. We continually read about how it is a golden age of true crime, and there is no doubt. We were speaking to a friend of ours this week in America, and he was just talking about how much true crime has been consumed just on Netflix alone during lockdown. I think, though, to be honest, Will, we would say that it's just as difficult today as it ever was to get your films funded and out there, whether it be true crime or any other genre. I think that you still have to have a very compelling story. And I think that the true crime that's out there, some of the great documentaries of the last few years have raised the bar considerably. If you want to watch Discovery ID and watch back-to-back, killed under the patio, they're there for you. But if you really want to tell a story that tells you something else other than just, the murder of someone or a horrific crime, you've got to really reach much further up into the tree and find those stories that tell us something about ourselves, tell us something about life in a different part of the world. But listen, I think that true crime is definitely in a very healthy space. And I think that you only have to look at the amount of true crime that's up there on Netflix and all the other platforms today. But I think the challenge to producers and filmmakers is still there. You've got to have an incredibly compelling story in order to get the funding for your film.
That's great. Thanks. A good reminder to end on, and makes us appreciate brilliant creative producers and directors like yourself all the more. Congrats again on a brilliant film, and thanks for joining us here today at the Film Fleadh.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Always great to be.
Cheers, Trevor.